and let's do it.
Get into it. What's on the agenda?
So we have a good agenda. Sometimes I like to had some LinkedIn comment or some lighter thing to start with, but nothing really on my mind right now. So we're gonna get right into it. Maybe it'll spark some thoughts from the audience. We'll get the chat up here, and we'll keep monitoring that for questions. And let's do it. So we are going to start tonight with what falls through the cracks when leadership adopts the growth at all costs mindset. So this one will be more like open-ended. I know that I've worked in a couple of these companies. I'm sure that a lot of us, either whether we recognized it or not, have probably been in one if you've been in the professional world, venture funded type of world over the past 15 years. So yeah, Megan, I'll pass this over to you and you can talk about some of the things that fall through the cracks.
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be candid about my experience too, I consider myself a woman of high integrity and empathy and ethics, but the pressure is real and the pressure can be real. And so I personally have definitely been in multiple startup situations where I come into a new company, very optimistic about, standing my ground on certain things, but I've certainly been in tough situations where I've seen the repercussions of this, and I've learned my lessons. So I try to, carry those with me. But just to dive into a couple of examples that I can share from my personal experience. I think one of the last companies I was at, managed by Q, in my last 9 months there, we were out fundraising, me and the CEO, and we had a clock ticking where we were going to run out of money, right? And as you're pitching investors or talking through potential acquisitions, the numbers matter a lot when you're in those conversations. And so I think that to kind of get back to the very specific question, I think the things that start to fall through the cracks are you become fixated on achieving a goal. And I'm actually all about I relentlessly pursue goals. And if I have such a fixed mindset, sometimes I can have tunnel vision in a bad way. And so I think really I've been caught up there. And I think what suffers is your customer experience. You make decisions that are in the best interests of your company and hitting a target within a time frame. Your internal team members, you inadvertently or purposefully create a pressure cooker environment for your sales team, your marketing team, your customer success team. That stresses everyone out. It causes them to make decisions that they wouldn't make otherwise if they weren't in such a pressured situation. And ultimately, even if, in hindsight, we were able to drive short-term results to get us over a finish line, but they weren't sustainable. And once we got through that finish line, things started to fall apart. And, in hindsight, it definitely wasn't worth it. I personally remember putting pressure on my team, on myself, believing that this was the most important thing, that it had to be done for the company to survive. So you can rationalize it in your head. But, looking back on that, that's not a type of company I want to run. That's not a type of team, I want to build. But I have a lot of empathy for founders, for CEOs, for heads of sales, heads of marketing, for people that are in that position, because you can be the best type of person, but if you're in a really tough situation, you can find yourself maybe making decisions you wouldn't otherwise make. And so I think for me, what I realized was I needed to make sure that as I chose my next environments, that I was not putting myself in an environment where that would be the case. And that would ensure that I could, continue to live out the things that I believe to be true. But I think, Prince, you said humanity falls through the cracks. And I think that's a great word to sum it up, because it impacts your customers, your internal team. And the short-term gains are completely temporary. They always fall apart. And so, and even in this particular instance, we ended up getting acquired by WeWork, and it was awesome. And then it wasn't awesome. And so like even the acquisition in and of itself, they ended up spinning the company back out. The whole thing was kind of a crazy, wild ride. And so, I think for me, my biggest lesson is, it's a tough situation to be in, and it's best to avoid those types of environments if you don't want to mess with it, because I do believe even the best people can be sucked in and maybe do things that they wouldn't otherwise do in a different environment.
So it'll be really interesting to talk about the ways to identify that before you're hired. So we can cover that in a moment. But this one sums up pretty simple to me. It's the first people that feel it are your employees, and you will see that in retention of your sales team is probably the first indicator. And then the people who will feel it next are your customers. And I don't think there's much more detail than that. Like the two things that matter most in your organization, if you're trying to build a big company, are people and the people that work for you and your customers that you serve. And both of those things are often not in alignment when you are focused on hitting a short-term financial outcome. Cool. So we'll kind of deviate from the agenda here because I want to go deeper. How do you identify those things before you start working there?
Yeah, I mean, one decision point is the business, is it a VC backed unprofitable startup, or is it a profitable business that can stand on its own? And so I think that that's absolutely, I mean, I kind of decided after 15 years in VC backed companies, like needed a break. We'll see for how long. And so I think that's signal number one. I think number two is, especially people younger in their career are often not as confident asking for financial information in the interview process. And you absolutely have a right to do so, especially if you're taking on any type of leadership position. And so, ask the tough questions around what's your CAC, what's your CAC to LTV ratio? What are the unit economics? What are the margins? Really dig into it and actually see, is the business healthy? A business can put up big numbers, GMV, and the actual revenue in your pocket is tiny once you take into account all of the costs. So, I think you have a choice, like, am I going sort of the VC backed route or not? Look at the financials. And then I think also I always ask about, how much of the sales team is hitting their quota? How do you set quotas? How do you set goals? What's the turnover like? Similarly on the marketing team or the customer success team. So I think those are like the big things that are fairly black and white, because you have those decision points, and then you want to dig into sort of the culture, right? Ask around about, try to uncover the things that people are not going to bring up to you in an interview when you're the candidate, to really understand like the hard part about working at the company, how leadership responds to situations. So those are the top things that come to mind. What would you add, Chris?
I mean, I don't have much to add on this one. I really don't. I feel like part of it is just experience and being able to feel it. And then secondarily, I love digging deeper into what is the average sales quota attainment, what is the quota coverage over their OTE would be an interesting one. How many reps do you have? How long do they ramp? Like, how long's your sales cycle? I think trying to dig into some of those things might be an indicator. Another one for the marketers listening is one that I love is, how is your commercial budget allocated? If you have $10 million in commercial budget between sales success and marketing, how much goes to marketing? And if they say 500K, it's probably not a company you want to go and market with. So some of those type of deeper financial questions will tell you a story about how willing they are to invest in your function. And as a marketer, let me tell you, It's a lot better position to be marketing in a company that prioritizes marketing first. It just is. And there's not that many out there. More companies will do it as you start to see more companies go into a freemium user acquisition product-led type of style. You will see more companies lean into marketing because that is the complementary GTM to a product-led growth strategy. Cool. Switching gears here. We'll kind of go out of order, and then maybe there's a question we can grab, and then we can get back on the agenda. And so the one I actually talked about it a little bit today on a podcast, and so would be happy to dive deeper for you all here, which is why intelligent leaders stop innovating. And so the just for some context, I was jamming with someone. You're going to like that podcast episode whenever it comes out, maybe Friday. A lot of good insights about PR and non-measurable type things that I'm starting to believe in a lot. And so why do innovative leaders stop innovating? Let's look at, for instance, the VP of demand at the $250 million ARR SaaS company. Why do they stop innovating? Because there's 3 management layers between them and anyone that actually does anything. And so if you're not in the work, how are you going to get better? How are you going to know when something doesn't work? Just by looking at a Salesforce dashboard, you're not going to know what to do instead. And so that one is really fascinating, that as you get further and farther away from the work, that you can't innovate. You can't be creative. I think a lot of people lose when they start getting too far into the management side, which is why I love to still be in accounts, and I still love to do this type of stuff and promote it and understand when we post the podcast in the comments of my LinkedIn post, how many people click on it and listen to it. I love knowing that. It's an insight. So I think that's one. The second one that is that I'm also really interested in is that over time, you have, as a leader, if you've been in a company for a while, you've built your reputation on whatever this is. Like, you have now continued to invest in a model. Let's just pretend that it's the lead gen MQL model, and you're getting 5,000 MQLs and the company's celebrating every month. It takes a lot of courage to be like, look, I know I built this. I know that I have 15 people on my team. 10 of them are not doing anything important. I know that I made a mistake. I own that. We're going to have to retool what we're doing in order to be successful again. And I'm going to have to take a step back. It's hard to do that. And so most people won't. Most people will wait it out and then find a new job and then leave someone else with the mess later. So those are two of the ideas that I see.
This is an interesting question. And I wonder how much poor prioritization and time management has to do with it as well. Because most of the leaders that I've worked with, and I certainly fall into this trap myself, is 80-90% of your time is just like making sure the trains run on time and just like running the business, making things happen, and not saying no to things. And your calendar is full of Zoom meetings from 9 to 6, and then you're cranking out work from 5 to 7 a.m. and 8 to 10 p.m. and you literally are not creating space and time for creative thinking and giving your brain the chance to create. If you stay too busy, it inhibits creativity, in my experience, and innovation. And most leaders have insanely packed calendars and don't think about creating that space that they need. And so, I'm big on time management. So when I fall into the trap, I'm able to like dig myself out of it and recognize when I'm falling into the trap. But I think that has a lot to do with it. People are just so busy, and some of the best, most like inspirational and visionary leaders I know are just very purposeful about creating time and space for them to have that creativity, to have that innovation. And I completely agree with you about the connection to the customer. That's absolutely a big one. And I think like we share that philosophy. Like no matter what position I've been in, I'm always either directly managing an account or very involved in multiple customer accounts. And I don't let a week go by without talking to a customer, no matter what position I've been in. pretty much for my whole career. So I think that's so important. So yeah, I would just add the time management piece.
Right on. So let's get into the questions. Uma, I think if I pronounce it correctly, has a great one. I'm gonna unmute you and let's get into it. Some little ABM. I was actually just down the street at someone's office today, $250,000 ARR SaaS, talking about ABM. They're at Series A, so this is timely. Let's do it.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Megan.
Hey, good to see you.
Nice to connect with you guys again. Yeah, so I was interviewing at a company today, early stage startup, and we talked about ABM, and I was trying to educate them as much as I know myself. I'm new to ABM. And some of the challenges that they talked about is they don't have a big database set up already. So they know that these are the big target accounts they need to go to, but they don't have a lot of budget also to implement Terminus or demand base and or enrich. And also how would we go about doing that? Because I feel for a small startup, in concept, target accounts where you can get the maximum outreach and maximum chances of revenue generation, like ROI is high. In a concept manner, it sounds really good to do. What has been your experience? How to do this? How to scale it?
Yep. A couple questions for you. This is why I love being on here, so we can go back and forth. How much does the product cost? Or if you don't know, if you had to guess, what do you think it costs?
I don't know, and it's a medical device company, so I don't know.
I imagine it's relatively high in those regulated industries. For everyone listening,
it's an FDA approved product, so it could be high, and it'll be something that the doctors and hospitals and insurance companies and all will use.
So for everyone listening, there's a couple key decision points that I make about how I'm going to approach this. The first one is, how much does the product cost? And the next question is, what is the TAM? What is the total addressable market? And so if the product is less than 50K ACV, I might use company firmographics in my LinkedIn targeting, but I'm not putting together a huge ABM strategy. I think that the cutoff, what Terminus publishes and Sangram publishes 50K, I think it might actually be closer to 100K to go through all of the effort to do all of those different things. You all decide, but somewhere in the 50 to 100K range is if it's lower than that, it might not be even ABM is a good strategy. You might as well do good demand gen with company firmographic targeting on top of it. The next one is TAM, which is interesting. So maybe there's only 500 accounts that you can sell to. Like for this company, for instance, maybe you can only sell to level 1 trauma centers. I don't know how many there are in the US, but there's probably less than 1,000. And at that point, you pretty much have to go ABM. The next thing I think.
So one point on that, their device is to be used by consumers. So there is a wide range of application that people can use, and it's portable device that you can wear on yourself to monitor your EKG and temperature. So very, very relevant in COVID and very portable. So the application target market I see is huge. It's absolutely
It depends
huge.
If you're selling to the consumer, or you're selling to the hospital. That's really what it depends on, right? If you're selling to the consumer a portable device, like it's less than $1,000, I mean, ABM definitely doesn't make sense there, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think they would ask that question.
No, I think it's being sold to hospitals, insurance, and they will use their device in their patient management.
The next thing that I think about is, do you need the tech? Like, I get that, Terminus and Demand Base and those types of companies have built a strong reputation that you need them to run display ads at those target accounts and be able to push out ads natively on LinkedIn that you could do anyway. Like, I know that they've built that idea in your head. Like, the analytics part of it is the part that I would probably find most valuable, although I haven't been inside of a lot of those tools very much because I just don't feel like they're necessary. And so I would just run LinkedIn targeted ads if you can't afford the whatever it is, $2,000 to $5,000 a month for the ABM tool. and I would invest it more in the ads. The second thing to think about is if you can, if the company can't afford the piece of ABM tech, then they probably aren't ready to do ABM, right? Like that's a small expense relative to the whole program. You actually have to do stuff once you have it. And so those are some of the things that the initial things that come to mind. If you're pushing back on, no, I can't afford, this $800 a month HubSpot tool or ABM tool, it's like, well, are you really ready to do some marketing then? Like those are some of the foundational things. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like, never mind. I'm not going to come up with anything smart. I was like, trying to, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was more me trying to understand. It's not them saying that they want to do. It was me trying to understand that would an ABM marketing work for them?
Yeah, I think the another core difference for everyone, I think this is just like things that are popping in my head that I think people would find interesting. The next one is whether you are doing true named account marketing versus targeting with company firmographics. Like if you can only sell to the manufacturing industry, that is, technically a tier 2, tier 3 form of ABM. You're just using company account firmographics as opposed to named accounts. And so like in general, if you're selling a B2B product and you're not just doing like random SEO or random ads targeted at people, like you're doing ABM anyway, in some form. So, I hope that was helpful. Any other follow-ups?
No, definitely helpful.
Cool. Keep the questions coming. Good to see you, Uma.
Yeah, they're coming. Here's a good one from Ashley. Are marketers using email automation lead to MQL to SQL nurtures as a crutch to avoid creating consistent of the moment quality content?
Ashley, I'm bringing you off mute for this one.
Hi there. You caught me between children.
Give me one. Nice. Give me one level deeper here. So, obviously the question's here, but let's get in to the juicy stuff.
All right. So I switched from a portfolio of like 40 brands.
I remember.
To one of just, 7, 8. Mm-hmm. And they're all a little stale. We're revitalizing things with some marketing. We have a product that puts out curated newsletters, but it's one list. We may build segmentation into that later, but we're big fans of using our own tools to show what our tools do. And I've been considering bringing some of my other brands on there and putting newsletters out through that platform that should appeal to our target personas. And instead of forking over, like we were on HubSpot where I used to be, and I know what all that beautiful segmentation can do, but I also know that we would spend forever building out these nurtures that like email to would just bottleneck it. Mm-hmm. And no one would get qualified through that nurture, and they would just get a call anyway because they had downloaded the ebook or whatever. Yeah. So I've been thinking a little bit lately about like, well, could you make the argument that these tools and these automations that are available, like the reason we want to use them is because they're really cool versus that they get the job done in the same way.
Because they make it easy.
Yeah.
And just because it's easy doesn't mean that you should do it. Right. And so like ever since, if you can look at exactly what's happening on what I do on LinkedIn versus an email nurture versus what I was doing in 2016 when I was focused a lot more on email than I am today, which is that you should be producing content at a high enough volume and a good enough quality that someone just gets into the stream and you are using it and you are pumping it out. And it should be relevant to all key people. Like nobody wants your first email like, hey, welcome to our company. Here's a
let me tell you what I do. Now would you like to kick the tires?
Blah, 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 blah. And so like, I do believe that there's a lot of reasons why they use nurtures. We've been through some of them, like, the marketing automation vendors have trained them to do it that way so that they can keep using the automation and different things like that. But the second one is like, people don't create enough quality content to support anything but the nurtures for the 5 emails that they created 3 years ago. And so, yes, I think it is a crutch. I think that it holds marketers back from not creating enough of a volume. I do believe that. I do.
Great.
So just affirming your question.
Thank you.
Good observation.
All right, I think we need to bring John on next, one of our loyal listeners. You're working on a piece for LinkedIn and you want some thoughts. I think we should unmute you and bring you into the conversation.
That can help you with this one.
Yeah, I have worked for a lot of CEOs in B2B and B2C, mostly B2B. And it always, the amount of time I spend trying to convince them to spend money on marketing is sometimes somewhat ridiculous. And I've run sales and I've run marketing, and I tend to prefer to run both so I can kind of keep the fighting between the two organizations down and the expectations consistent. But I wanted to throw it out to the group and to you guys. You know, what are some of your thoughts? Why are so many CEOs resistant to spend money on marketing? And what creative things have you done to convince them the leverage point that marketing can truly be? Because you do good marketing and your sales get a lot easier and a lot more predictable.
Absolutely. I've worked in a lot of these different companies. The reason that they don't invest in marketing, if they do invest in marketing, they force it down your throat to run performance marketing lead gen so that they can measure it like sales, because they think about people like salespeople. They just think about marketing like sales, and it's, you know, you can do it, but it's not really the way to do it. And the reason being is that most executives have been a professional for the past at least 20 years, probably more. And so at the beginning of their career, where they might have built a company to 50 million and then sold it for 400 million, they did it through brute force sales. And the reason that they could do it then is because that's the way buyers discovered and purchased products. Is that they weren't going on Google and saying, how do I solve this? And looking in 2001, they were waiting for someone to call them and show them a new tool, or they were showing up at a trade show or whatever they were doing. But like that is the reason why they don't invest in marketing, is because they had a very good success early in their career. Goes back to the beginning of why leaders don't innovate, is they had found a model that worked and they keep repeating it regardless of how the outcome changes. And then you get to 2020 and the effectiveness of that has decreased, but they haven't taken the steps and the learnings in order to see how there's a different way to do it. And Megan, I got a couple more thoughts, but I'll pass it to you and then we can kind of go back and forth. I guess maybe the point where you can help here is how would you convince? And I don't really like the word convince, but I understand why it's being used in this context.
How do you shift someone's perspective? I feel like this a version of this came up before too, because I know, Chris, you've said if they don't believe in marketing, find a different CEO to work for. Mm-hmm. But I am a big believer that people can change their minds and shift their perspectives. But it requires that you speak to them in a language that they can understand. And I think in this case, depending on the CEO, especially if they're more sales focused, more metrics driven, almost making a business case for it, pointing to other examples where it's worked, showing them the impact that good marketing has had at another company, finding opportunities to maybe get them to buy into a short-term experiment or test that you feel confident you can drive some type of result to prove to them that, and then get their buy-in. If I run this experiment and do this result, you'll then, let me give me more budget and let me sort of continue to scale this idea. So that's how I think, go about positioning it. And also just having a frank conversation with them to gauge whether they're open-minded enough to even consider it. Because I will say, I think to Chris's stance on this, there are some people that will never change their mind. And so trying to identify if that's the case for you is important. If you do think they're open-minded, I would go that route. And it might require a bit of compromise of continuing to do some things that maybe you don't think are the right thing to do, but the CEO wants you to do it while you have your small experiments on the side. But results, like pointing to real results, is I think what changes people's mind.
Yeah. And to be clear, the reason is not that you'll never change their mind. It's that it's going to inhibit your progress. You're going to be slowed down by having to explain and convince people in every step of the way. And so if you, instead of spending all that effort and time trying to convince someone, if you took a step back and found someone that believed in it, you could just go and you would learn at such an accelerated pace, which is why I feel that way. Now, in 2016, I did this. Like, I worked at a company that, you know, if they did spend on marketing, it was going to trade shows and doing these different things. And like, I had to beg to run a $500 test on Facebook ads. And 12 months later, I was managing a $1.2 million budget on content and ads and demand. And so, and the way that I did that was I ran the $500 experiment. I tracked the 4 demo requests that came in. It took 3 or 4 months for them to close on an average 176-day sales cycle, and they closed faster in the way that I positioned. Then we had one deal. We spent $500 and we got whatever it was, $36K back. And then we had that. And then I looked at the sales cycle and I was like, this sales cycle was 50% of what it normally is for us. They closed faster. The sales rep only had to go to 2 meetings. Normally we have to go to 4. You know, out of the 4 deals, we won 1. That was 25% win rate. On the deals we're having SDRs call, we're winning at 7%. 25% seems better to me. And then just kept building. And then the budget went up a little bit. And then I convinced them that we didn't need to go to 12 trade shows. We could just go to 3, and I could take the money that was left over from the 9 that were doing nothing, and we could move it into doing more of the programs that were working. And so I'm very grateful that I went through that experience. If I didn't, I'm not sure that I would be here. However, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't do it again because it held me back a lot. But the struggle also taught me a lot that I think a lot of people get value out of now. So, you know, no regrets on that one. But it's like, and I said on the podcast that I was on today, like, if you are in that position, you have to, like, at that time I was communicating with such confidence and conviction that my approach was better, that there were times where I was at risk of getting fired for how I was communicating because I felt so passionately about it. And secondarily, once you do that, you're on the hook for the results. And so you can get fired trying to actually get the money to do the experiment. And then if the experiment doesn't work, then you get fired too. And if either of those cases happen, it's great. Like, go find a place to work with that you were going to have to leave anyway because the CEO doesn't believe in marketing. So, yeah, I hope that story was helpful. It just echoes Megan's, like, figure out how to position an experiment where it's set up to succeed in real outcomes, not in leads and shit like that. Cause then I'll just go on another tangent here. Like, I have a lot of people come in and ask if we will charge our fee, not on a flat fee, but on a based on performance. And I'm like, okay, what metric do you want to quantify our performance on? And they're like, leads. And I'm like, if you want me to do leads, I can go and get you leads for $2 and rip you off over 3 months. And then you're going to fire us. Like, let's align our outcomes to something that matter. And so, yeah, set up the experiment to succeed, communicate on metrics that matter. And lastly, if you have a sizable enough experiment and it works, and then you should compare it to whatever's happening today. And so sales cycle length, win rate, revenue, pipe, CAC, you can compare whatever you're doing to the 10 SDRs that are cold calling and make a black and white comparison. Those are some of the ideas. Great question, John. Appreciate you.
I know there's so much chatter in the chat. I'm looking for the questions.
Ooh, we got a good one from Chuck. Chuck, you're in, man. Let me get you in here.
Oh, the company page question? Yeah.
Hey there. Yeah, I was just kind of following up on a question Abai and I had last week about your LinkedIn organic growth campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said you were focusing on growing your corporate page too, and you had some experiments you were trying. I was curious to see if you had an update on that, how that was going, and if it was going, has it changed your mind any on using the personal profile pages for organic growth for your company's social media organic presence versus building a corporate page?
So we'll take a look here. I'll just show you open the keys to the castle, and I'll walk you through a couple things. The first thing is that just the company page does not replace personal profiles. You need to do them in concert. And so in the process of building the company page, one, just because I believe and would like to really understand it better than anyone else is the reason that I'm doing this. At the same time, so we have my profile, and now Megan's posting, and we have a couple other people on our staff. So having a lot of personal profiles going, and then a company page that offers a unique differentiated point of view. That's not like just, we raise this much money and, here's a gated case study or whatever it is. If you actually provide value and you use the platform in the way it's intended to be used and how the audience wants to consume content, I believe that it can work. And so over the past 30 days, we're at 4,000 followers, got 126,000 organic impressions. If you compute that into the CPM value of LinkedIn, that's $80,000 alone. Let me do the math again. $80 CPM. I'm not sure. 80 times 125. It's probably not $80,000. I can't do the math in my head. Follower growth increased by 25% over the past 30 days. Will that growth continue? Will the trajectory stay the same, or will it plateau or slow down? We'll find out. 700 clicks to the website, organic. I like that. Same difference. You're paying $10 cost per click on LinkedIn for the ads. Like, that's 70 grand. Sorry, 7,000. Can't do math today, but so yeah, those are some of the metrics. But let's get a little bit deeper into your question. I just wanted to kind of show that out there because I thought that it's interesting for people to see. Like, if you compare it against paid impressions, and that your followers are the right people, and you don't have whatever it is, $80,000 to spend on ads, like, I think it can work. And what I'm seeing in my personal profile that's particularly interesting for everyone is that the results get exponentially better as you continue to grow. Like, yes, maybe the results are not there at 4,000 followers, but wait till what happens at 12, and then 20, and then 30. And so, like, this is the reason that brand is so important, is that, like, it does not scale linearly. Like, as you do it, it gets way, way better. Cool. So what was the question again?
Was just like, has your perspective changed any regarding focusing primarily on the personal pages versus having the company page involved? And it sounds like you're saying, why not do both? Or there's no harm in doing both anyway.
I think there's a couple ways to approach it. My direct recommendation for a less than $30 million ARR company, and I'll give it for a larger company, but less than 30 million ARR, is that one SME should prove a personal profile and prove that it works. And in the meantime, you can empower other people to do it on their own. And so one person prove that it works, and then scale out on employees, and then add company page. So in like that type of order, if you start with company page and you don't have any personal profiles and a lot of other things, I think that it might take too long. It might not get there. So it's more like a supplement, not an either or.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured.
And I will keep you updated as we learn more.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Good to see you, Chuck. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Gosh, my math was, and it's happened actually a couple, as I'm being recorded more and more, it's very clear that like my mental math is not very good.
Someone needs to buy Chris a calculator. I had a very practical question from Matthew, and I don't know if it was answered in the chat, but how do you go about figuring out your TAM? Actually, I think it's a good question. It's been tough for me at a couple of companies. I think a few people mentioned different websites, like the Bureau of Labor, Gartner Forrester, like having good sources to get data when you know what your ideal customer profile is, whether it's like company size, industry, and looking that up. But curious, Chris, in your experience, how do you think about this?
So what most executives at VC funded companies do is that they broaden their ICP, and they slightly inflate their ASP in order to make their TAM feel way bigger than it actually is. And so like the core decision point in this is that you need to define it's called an ideal customer profile for a reason. Not everyone that could reasonably use your product. And so like, I like to, especially in early stages, much more narrowly define my ICP and therefore my addressable market, because it helps me focus my messaging and my sales efforts and my marketing efforts. And then once you get in, then you have the resources and all of the other things to continue to expand what type of market that you can serve, or you create such a good, impression and word of mouth in that specific segment that other people start to take notice and come in. And so I think that the core piece of this is not the data. Like you can find the data and use your ASP and project how it's going to grow and do all of those things. Like that's, I think, more of the formulaic part. I think the more strategic part is actually defining your ideal customer profile in a reasonable way.
Yep, that makes sense.
Who doesn't want to say that there's 5,000, who wants to not sell to 5,000 extra accounts that, might use the product, and then they can go to investors and say, based on our ARR, our TAM is 600 million, not 300 million.
Happens all the time. Looking through, you guys are so chatty tonight. So I'm just looking through, finding, I love it. Oh, Prince, another good question.
We got one from Jonathan too that I don't want to miss, but go ahead.
Oh, go for it. I'll save this one for Prince after.
All right, Jonathan, this is a quick one, but I'm going to bring you on because maybe we'll take in a different direction here. See if I can find you. I'm going to unmute you. Hello.
Hey,
So
Jonathan.
your question was sort of like a yes or no, but let's go a little bit deeper than that. So go ahead. We can ask it for everyone, and then we'll kind of talk about it.
What was my question?
Yeah,
it was, ABM is the darling new acronym.
Oh, yeah. Anybody that's got more than one decade doing this crap knows that every 5 years, things are just relabeled. So you could call ABM key account selling and put it in a 1988 Chevy, and it's the same damn thing. Mm-hmm. So, we can go in a million one directions from here. Is there anything different besides innovative technology to focus on accounts that if you screw up prospecting, you can't talk to for 18 months? Or, are there deeper things here, or is this just a nice, shiny new lipstick on a tried and true pig?
So we'll go in two directions. First here, it's how many people are really doing it now. And according to the Salesforce State of Marketing 2020 report that was recently published, 92% of B2B marketers have an ABM strategy.
Bullshit.
Which blows my mind.
Yeah. Bullshit.
So maybe they like to report it on the little survey.
They also
Salesforce loves to report it because the ABM tool is something that's going to integrate with their software. And so there's a lot of, conflating variables in here, but that's what the report says. I might be misquoting it by a couple percentage points, but it was above 90%. Which makes no sense because, like I said at the beginning, if you have less than 50K ACV, you probably shouldn't be doing quote unquote ABM as it's prescribed. You can use company firmographics in your targeting, but you don't need to have an ABM stack to do that. What was the second piece of the question? So you said 5-10% of people who say they are. So I mean, based on the report, and it's the best data point that I have at the moment, it says 92% of marketers report they have an ABM strategy. And then what was the second part? Because I had a thought there, but I lost it.
I mean, it's one thing to say you have. It's like saying I'm fully functional and running everything through AI, and all my marketing outreach or customer engagements, which is also total bullshit. So, if people are out there doing new things with ABM, what is new that we should be looking at that just hasn't been, done with key account focus in the past?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest example that comes to mind for me is like the difference between filling out a request with a drift bot versus a form. the form's actually easier to fill out. The DriftBot has this little typing thing. You got to do a bunch of fields. And then it's really the follow-up process that was broken, not the submission process. And so like, I think that there are some parallels there to what some of the ABM tools do. Like I said, I think that one of the most valuable things that those tools do is the account engagement type of metrics. But again, those right now, not a lot of people are in office. The IPs are off. Like mobile works very poorly. And so if you have a mobile first advertising strategy and you are using ABM tools, it's going to tell you that the stuff isn't working. And so do I see places where you should definitely adopt it? For sure. Do I think that every company should have Terminus and be running an ABM strategy? Definitely not. And yes, I do agree that account-based marketing, as they frame it up, and I've talked about this enough times for everyone, but I'll just mention it here, as they frame it up, is basically key account selling using marketing channels to get leads for conversations. And it's just like it's just a targeting strategy. The marketing underneath the targeting is what matters. Mm-hmm. How are you positioning? How are you messaging? Who are you engaging with? Where are you sending them to? What conversion points are you sending them to? How much does your product cost? You know, what type of content are you producing? How much content are you producing? What is the creative inside of it? And so like just being able to run a banner ad to, you know, certain IP addresses that you deem as a target account is not going to get it done.
Well, the one good thing from it then might be to the prior conversation, how to get CEOs to spend more money on marketing. You just call everything ABM. Because it's new, they'll want to spend money on it.
Enough CEOs have invested in it that 92% of marketers think that it's their strategy. So, I mean, yeah.
And Uma here, and I am seeing so many jobs out there where they're looking for ABM strategists, somebody who's done it for 4 years or 3 years. And it's like all of a sudden it's become this new buzzword that you gotta know if you want to be employable.
Yep.
You know, unfortunately, I don't have control over how people hire people. And for some companies, it's the right skill. And like I'm going to have a lot of good quotes, and I can't wait to send all of you this podcast because it was great about how the guy I was interviewing started his career. He was like one of the first people that ever used Marketo and built his entire career on performance marketing. And now here we are in 2020 and doesn't do any performance marketing. And so it's kind of like right now, like there's a lot of young, it doesn't have to be young. There's a lot of marketers right now that could build their career on ABM. Mm-hmm. It's just the truth. Like when the market wants something, like I choose to do things that are unique and differentiated. And I think just ahead of where people are operating. But it wouldn't take me too long to take a step back, figure out ABM, and then go get a VP of demand at a $500,000 ARR type of enterprise sale. Like, so I think a lot of people could learn it and could find good opportunities. It's just like the market wants it. The market's always right.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for your question, John. We might have you back again.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see if there's more questions in the queue. Good to see you.
We haven't had Prince on yet tonight, so let's bring our friend on.
He's blowing up the chat though.
This is, I think this is also like related to the topic that Ashley brought up earlier around, and Prince, I'll let you speak to it, but like throwing out maybe the old school email nurture. And if we throw that out, what is and hopefully I'm interpreting your question right, Prince, but what's the master nurturing marketing sales funnel content creation strategy? Do you want to clarify, Prince, your question there?
Yeah, struggling with my voice this morning, but I think you're on point. So essentially, it's more so related to driving more inbound, right? And creating value propositions for your customers so that they're primed up by the time they get to you. And tying it back to Chuck's question that he just asked right now, right? The paid social thing. If you focus on value proposition, they are indeed primed up. So what I'm essentially asking is, what would be key characteristics of qualifying a great nurturing sales/marketing funnel, and how do you master it so that once the customers are, I mean, there's this rule of 7. The 7 times they see your brand and they know you, then by the time they get to your company's page, they're primed up to buy. How do you identify, what characteristics do you use to qualify that?
You know, it's super interesting, and I was thinking a lot while you were asking that question, which is that, like, I could come up with some creative answer about, like, when everyone follows me on LinkedIn, like, they get a couple posts, I comment on theirs, there's a little funnel being built, eventually some people will trickle down and do it, but I just never think that way. You know what I mean? My thought process is just, how do I continuously bring value to people? And as I produce more content that educates and helps more people be successful, it will create more awareness about what I do, and people will trust me, and more people that need whatever I'm selling will know about me versus whoever else is the alternative. And when more people know about me, more people will use my service versus other people's. And so I personally just don't think about things in like funnels, because people are humans. And so I just think that it's more complex than that. I think that a lot of people will sell you on the idea that all you got to do is just find a way to get 1,000 email addresses and put them in the top. And then as you whittle it down with some different things, 5 people will fall out. And you can do that, and 5 people might fall out. And my position is that all of the work to create those 5, all that work would be better used doing something else, and you would get 10 or 20.
I think you can break down what you're saying, though, Chris, into characteristics, right?
Totally. So talk me through it.
Consistency, volume, quality, audience focused, value add, relevant, entertaining, interesting, controversial, right? Like these, like you could break down.
It's also about choosing the right delivery channels, right? Like if I was sending the same type of content that I produce on LinkedIn every day through email, I would be nowhere close to where I am right now. Right. And so it's also about choosing the right channel. Like you can do email at a 1-day frequency, like I post on LinkedIn, and there's very little shareability in email. There's way little network effect. The discoverability is awful. And so I don't know why people are so obsessed with using email. It's just like, I think that evolving from that perspective, and the pushback is like, on LinkedIn, like I don't own the data. It's like, well, somebody changes companies, they change their email, and you could get it on Zoom Info for $1 anyway. And so, can email work? Absolutely. Does it work? Yes. Do we execute it for clients? Yes. Like it's not that I'm against email. It's that I prioritize it in the order that it deserves, which is like, it's my 5th priority, not my number 1.
Love it. And let me just ask a follow-up to validate that, because I'm on the same page, and I saw a lot of questions going around, so I just wanted to put that out there. How much, or have you been able to qualify? I think you have been. Quantify. Yeah, I think you have been. How much of your company's followership is increasing based on the content you individually put out? I'm following the same strategy, and it is that element of human connection, because people connect with human beings rather than automated bots, or,
Is there a number for sure? Is it like that meaningful? No. Like if you look at the span of the last 12 months, I've probably gotten, I don't have the data. I could pull it up if we really want to go into it, but it's probably somewhere between 10 and 25 million views on LinkedIn in the last 12 months. And we had before we started posting on LinkedIn, we had 2,500 followers. Right. And so yes, there was a ton of visibility through my posts and my profile views. And some people went through and followed the company page when we weren't posting a lot, but it just wasn't enough to make an impact, if that makes sense. You'll get some, but I wouldn't hang your hat on that being a way that's going to drive meaningful results.
No, absolutely. So we focus on content. I just pasted a link here for everybody. It's a B2B value pyramid, just as something that would help people.
Thanks, Prince. Good to talk to you, man. Really super happy that you find enough value in this to wake up at 5 a.m. and come hang with us. All right. I think we had, there was a good one here. Did you see it, Megan?
I'm looking for some.
Oh yeah, here it is. Max Scholl, get on here.
Hey, how's it going, Chris?
Hey man, what's up?
So yeah, just a question on intent data. It can just be like a big rabbit hole that you go down to. It's like a new shiny object, kind of like ABM. Just curious on if you think it's even worth like pretty hefty price tag that it pulls on. Like, yes, it can signal that people are interested in your product, but if you're actually doing like demand gen content, getting all of that up and running correctly, then you shouldn't even really need that per se. It should just come to you if you're really running the engine right. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so when I survey smart people in Martech, people that serve hundreds of enterprise companies and do their Marketo builds and all the other integrations and all those different things, and I ask them, what is the most overhyped Martech category right now? The most common answer is intent data. I've tested a lot of intent data, and I think that it's if you're using it in a marketing context, I think it is incredibly overhyped, like true marketing, to use it as a targeting criteria to go after someone in ads. Like we have tested G2, Trust Radius, Bambora. There's probably one other one that I can't remember right now. All those different ones, taken that account data, built ABM lists with function targeting on top of it, targeted all those people with our demand programs for months. And the cold targeted audiences that we go after that use company firmographics and function targeting work better. And so the place where I see intent data being used well, I feel like, is to activate quote unquote warm outbound. Like I think it's actually a better sales tool, and whether you want to put like that SDR camp into marketing and chalk it up that way, that's fine. But it's like whoever they sit underneath in the organization, I believe that it's sales. And so that's the place where I think that companies are deploying it the most, and probably the most useful way to use that data right now.
Yeah, kind of in the same boat. I think we'll see if we can use it like that great for marketing, but I'm thinking it's going to be better for like outbound and letting the reps use that. So cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Max.
Got an interesting one from Nuam. And it's a little lengthy, so I think this is another great one to bring him on if you're up for it. And I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Nuam, you're back. Let's see.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a long one. I guess I'm in a position right now where I'm being asked to produce, some marketing collateral, a brochure in particular, for our sales team to go in and hunt down the corporate market. It's kind of like an enterprise deal. We're fairly new in the space, so we don't have a brand there that's recognizable. And so basically, it's something that we're sort of trialing. We've had one or two clients who are doing it with us at the moment, and so all of a sudden we need to put a nice little glossy brochure and just go out there and reach as many new accounts with it as we can. What else did I say in there? So the ideas that I have in the corporate space, especially from listening to you guys for the last couple of months, is all kind of long-term. I want to build the brand. I want to make sure that we're discussing these really interesting topics to the right people in these companies. We're essentially selling a service that involves a few stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So you've got procurement, who manage all the supply chain agreements, and then we've got the TA hiring managers and HR, who decide how people who decide how people are sourced into the business. And then there's finance, who at the end of the day decide, whether or not they need to cut And so they're the ones that end up putting the pressure on the rest of the stakeholders. So we're trying to deal with all of that and understand their buying behavior. But then, yeah, there's a pressure on marketing to, sort of put the offer together, put a nice little 2-pager, and then just allow the salespeople to go after accounts, possibly just to say, here's what I've got, here's what we've got.
If people on here notice, I moved it to gallery view because I'm going to do a poll, and the poll is, I don't even know how to ask the question, the way to get the answer, but it's like, when's the last time anyone read a brochure like thoughtfully and went through it in person? Like, anyone gives me a brochure, it goes directly in the trash. Thumbs up or thumbs down, last 5 years. Like, it's a no. Nobody here. Oh, John likes the brochures. He's getting a +1. Okay, we got one. We got Ashley, who kind of likes the brochures too. All right, I stand corrected, but John is way down on the brochures. So, in my experience, about making the brochures, typically it's a reactive response from sales, and the key for me that as I went through this and learned after I made me and my team made the 3rd brochure, and then we printed 100 copies and never got used, is to really try and understand what they're really asking for, because they're asking you for a brochure, but they need something else. They need.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like try and dig a layer deeper to what is the actual problem that they're trying to solve, or the actual outcome that they need, because the brochure becomes the go-to thing that they think they need. But I think if you ask deeper, you'd figure out something else. Maybe it's a 10-minute interview with an SME addressing the objection. Maybe it's, a 2-minute walkthrough demo video that they can watch without needing to go into the facility and drop it off right now. There's a million different things. It's our job, especially when you're getting these requests, 1, to be able to deeply understand what they really mean, and 2, being able to thoughtfully push back on the things that you're working on that are driving outcomes, and try and defer that request. So that's my thought. In large organizations, somebody's going to have to make the brochure, right? My feeling is that if email's number 5 on the list, brochures are way down. Brochures are close to the last thing on the list.
Yeah.
Even pose the question that Chris posed to the group, right? To the people you're working with, and ask them, when's the last time you looked at a brochure and made a buying decision? As a way to prove your point, politely, of course.
Yes, I will.
Chuck has another good question that several people thought was good. Are there any branding and marketing thought leaders you'd recommend following besides yourself, Chris? Are there any branding models you recommend in constructing a brand? I personally enjoy Donald Miller's story brand. I also like Andy Cernovitz, Andrew Davis, Byron Sharp. Curious who you enjoy listening and reading.
One of the really and a couple people I like reading Dave Gerhardt's stuff. I like reading about stuff that are people in agreement, but there's a couple things here. I talk to a lot of smart people that never post on LinkedIn. And so that's one thing, is that it's almost like within 5 minutes, I'm like, yeah, they get it. So that's one. The second thing is that I've been way more interested recently watching how companies market, not how people tell you to market. And so I go in and I will follow companies that are quote unquote paving the way in marketing. And then I see when they post a gated case study on LinkedIn. I see when they have an Instagram story ad that makes me stop and watch the whole 15 seconds. I click and look at their landing pages and look at how good they are and what they're trying to do and where they put the button and whether or not I would click on it and where I dropped off. And so it's really interesting if you think about going through other companies' marketing as a consumer and then trying to figure out and learn from that. I've been doing that since 2016. I take all the things that I like, I throw out all the shit that I don't, and I just start building my own, right? You're using other people's someone else paid an agency $100,000 to put that ad together. So I'm going to take the things that are good about it and I'm going to go and do it on my own for $1,000, you know? So it's almost like let other people have figured out certain things that you can kind of take.
Are there any companies that come to mind that you think do a good job?
I've talked about this last one. I think the one that's doing, at least the one that's marketing to me, I think in the most progressive and effective way, is a company called Rippling. I think they raised like $200 million, and it's pretty obvious that they're, you know, everywhere that I look. And, you know, I haven't bought their stuff, but it's the only HRIT tech that I know about. At some point, as a CEO, I might need to make that investment. And I'm not going to Google and evaluating options. I'm just going to get it. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people underestimate like that type of stuff matters. So that's one. If you wanted to look like, and it's also about the components. Like I think that Rippling is doing an incredible job in paid social, specifically paid Facebook and Instagram. And I think, you know, Outreach and Gravy and a couple other companies are doing a really good job with employee profiles on LinkedIn. And so it's almost like you can look at one company's mix, but most companies are leaning into a specific channel or thing. And so start to try and like widen the sphere and look at certain companies that you can usually clearly tell what channel they're focused on, which is probably where they're putting their best people and their most budget. And so you could go and look at that and reverse engineer what they're trying to do and what outcomes they might be getting.
Nice. Alyssa has a good question about how do you go about aligning your sales org towards the metrics that matter, i.e. convincing your sales teams that cold outbound calls and list buying is not effective for a SaaS company with an LTV of 50K plus and a long, complex sales cycle.
Alyssa, get on here. We got a lot to talk about.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, great. Okay. Tell me a little bit more. So 50K lifetime value, but what's the annual value?
It varies quite a bit right now because we switched our ICP dramatically. So we have everything from 100,000 annual to 10 million. So it's kind of hard to look at the numbers there at that point, and it will be for a while. But yeah, it's a big range from our like legacy customers to our new enterprise level customers.
Yeah, but 100K is still a lot on an annual basis, right? Like it's still a pretty big deal size, and then it goes all the way up. Like this is not going to make, this might surprise some people, but like at those ACVs, like you should be doing outbound. Like you should be. And I think almost any range above, it's not that you should only lean into marketing, but I think the point that I'm trying to make when I communicate some of this stuff is that the investment level between the two functions is so imbalanced. And so it's more so the company that spends 95% of their budget on sales to sell to those companies and none in marketing creates a lot of inefficiencies on the sales side, and you're missing out on a lot of opportunity by not covering it. But when you're selling 100K plus deals, you're gonna be doing cold outbound. You can go and get the 6 Sense tool, which I think is a great tool to activate quote unquote warm outbound based on intent data or other signaling. So I think that would be an interesting point. List buying is to do nurtures or one-to-one type of stuff. Like I'm not a big fan of it. I know there are companies, like let's get into some details here. I know there are companies that have a service that's like sales development associates, where they go and they source real information for people that are in your ICP, so that your salespeople don't need to do that like low level work, and they probably have systems and all these things to figure it out. Like that's probably a good use of money than using your full-time employee to do that activity if that's part of your strategy, right? And so when it gets back to it, I think that I wouldn't spend time convincing them that they shouldn't be doing it. Just pure experience, like they're going to do it. It's just figuring out how you can get the thing that you need to do what you want to do as well. So
And I think I would add here, I think a lot of this also, you bring up the point around aligning the orgs. And I think what can happen in a lot of companies is sales gets a number, and they come up with a plan and a strategy to get that number. Marketing gets a budget, they figure out how they're going to use that budget, right? And so I remember at Q, when I actually had the opportunity where I was running marketing, sales, and account management, and it had great marketing leaders, given that it's not my area of functional expertise. I think the best year we had was when we all made our plan together, and we had a very holistic strategy of, this is the company goal that we want to hit, and here are all of the leverage that we have. There are things we can do in marketing and sales and success. There are different things we can do across these different functions, different paths we can take to get to the same goal. As a group, let's all decide what we believe is the right strategy, where we can, each team can use their strengths in contribution of that goal, like that are complementary to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of the problems that exist are individual teams just make their own plan, and it either doesn't jive with or complement, or I've also seen it contradict other team plans. And I think it's that lack of, I think, clarity at the company level, having a North Star goal to work towards, and people not investing in bringing all of those teams together. I don't think there's a one size fits all strategy, but making sure that you have that approach to company planning, goal alignment, having a real strategy that spans teams is, I think, critical here as well.
Yeah, we've done some major work on that. So thank you. That's all great advice, because one of our biggest challenges right now is sales and marketing alignment. But yeah, I was just curious to get your take on the like cold outbound, like outsourcing to a third party who doesn't know your tech at all, right? Cold outbound sales calls, which, you know, kind of seemed a little weird to me when our return on ad spend is like 9 to 1, you know, where I feel like I could pull some other levers that would maybe be more valuable, but we are going to test it. But I just was curious to see, you know, if anyone's had success with that, or, you know, what your past experience has been. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the same thing if I was looking to run a marketing experiment. Like I would like the space to be able to do the experiment. So I think we can't be talking out of both sides of our mouth. If they want to run this experiment, we should let them. Like, I kind of know what it's going to look like, but at those types of ACV levels, it's a volume game. And if those people are just booking meetings and you project that you're going to win 2 to 4% of those meetings, like you can make the math work. So yeah, I would let the experiments run, and then I would just make a black and white comparison. The second thing that you should think about is do you know how much you should be spending? Like you just said, 9 to 1. I'm guessing that's ROAS, or on lifetime value, not ARR.
Yeah, ROAS.
And so, like, do you know how much more room there is where you could maintain that type of ROI?
I mean, right now for 12K, we get 114 grand. So it's you know, pretty, I don't know, seems through logical to me.
Paid search?
Yeah, through paid. Paid search and display.
Yeah, I mean, the things, we can get into some details here because I spent a lot of time doing it. I did it this morning. The first thing that I would do is I would figure out what your most positive ROI keywords are. I would look at your search impression share, and you can calculate how much you should be spending. So I'll go into a company, you know, they have 34 conversions for a certain keyword, and they have less than 10% impression share, and they're losing 75% due to rank, and they're losing 12% due to budget. And so there's a lot of work to be done optimizing that ad. It's not even really, It's not a budget. It's not mostly a budget issue. It's a rank issue. And so you can go in there and look at the metric is search impression share. And then you can look at how much is lost due to rank, how much is lost due to budget, what position you are on average. You can look at a lot of those different metrics and then figure out how much you should be spending. So you can actually project out at trying minimum 75% impression share. And so if you're spending 12, and you could go and make the case that you would get the exact same ROI at a certain budget increase. And that's what I would do. That's a very black and white conversation.
Cool. Yeah, that validates my hunch. So
right on.
Thanks.
Cool. Happy to help.
Ooh, a fun question from Uma. Key difference in marketing approach towards SaaS versus on-prem product?
Uma, get back on here. I'm not sure. We need a little bit more detail here. I mean,
or I guess
SaaS versus on-prem is just like.
Okay, so here, I am looking for a job, right? So I'm talking to all the different companies, and there's this one company that I'm really interested in. They used to be more on-prem product, and now they're going SaaS model. And so I have done on-prem and SaaS marketing both, and I don't see much of a difference in approach other than wordings and maybe how you release the product updates in terms of software. What is it that you see in your experience that when people go SaaS model, how should you customize your marketing approach?
So a couple key things that I look at when I'm looking for a place that I might want to work is culture and the executives at the top, the actual product, the market and that they're in, and whether or not it's growing or not. And so the key point of why I say that is that if they're on-prem and they're just moving to SaaS, they are not a digitally native company. And I think long-term they're going to struggle, right? Like if you're moving from on-prem to SaaS and it's 2020, like there's larger issues in that business long-term. I feel like if they haven't made the switch over the past 2 decades, right? And so that's one key kind of insight that I heard when you were asking. And then I think there's a lot of differences between a SaaS model and an on-prem. On-prem has usually a huge upfront cost of installation and different things like that. The total cost of ownership is high. You need someone in person to do it. The updates are incredibly painful at times to the software. And so I think there's a lot of different marketing challenges between the two. SaaS, the actual cost of ownership is spread out more evenly than in an on-prem model. So I think you take quite a different approach. But in general, like without knowing anything else besides what you've told me, it wouldn't be a place where I gravitated toward to be an employee. Cool.
That's a good one. To something.
Thanks, Uma. Always love your questions. Happy to help. Can't wait till we can come back here one day and we can celebrate when you got your job. Just make sure it's the right one. Okay, right on. There's one from
I'm gonna ping you, Chris.
Can't wait. We'll celebrate. Cool. We got one from Matthew here, which I think is interesting. Do you think virtual events will be a thing post-COVID? Megan, you want to jam on this one for a little bit? You have some ideas on events and happy to answer it, but I'm sure that we'll kind of be in alignment here on what we're thinking.
Yeah. So I definitely think virtual events will still be a thing post-COVID. I do think that as soon as people can gather in small and large groups, they absolutely will. And I think it'll be great to have live events again. But I think that virtual events, I mean, they work. I think they have an opportunity to have a broader reach. I think you have an opportunity to have sessions like this that happen on a frequency where in person might not work. I think it's so cool that we have people like on every continent on this call, which wouldn't be possible, if we all had to go to the HubSpot conference in Boston. And so I absolutely think there's a place for it. I'm really interested and excited about how we evolve like past like Zoom and something like this, right? Like this is great and this works awesome, but I think that there's absolutely an opportunity to enhance and disrupt what a virtual event is. I haven't actually participated in one, but we were talking to an event company was saying that they'd have 10,000 people on a virtual event, which seems like insane to me. But that's happening in places. So I think the people that will win will have a strategy that combines in-person and virtual, and they're going to continue to get really creative on how to continue to make the event even more interesting, entertaining, engaging. Some of my favorite moments on these sessions is when we bring you all into the conversation, right? And so how can you do that in a scalable way? So that's my view. I don't know what you would add, Chris.
I think smart companies will move into a hybrid model. I think that's what they should have been doing before this happened as well. And so it's interesting to think about how this situation has just pushed people to do things that they should have been doing anyway. And so, yes, I think hybrid is the answer. I think virtual events will still be around because of the pure, just like broader scale that you can hit by doing it, and the lower cost and all these different reasons. The thing that has changed that have made my events, not just like the one we're doing here, but even when I was working as a demand marketer in 2016, why I feel like my events have always, I think, just performed better is because my primary objective of the event is content creation, not sales. And so I think that the companies that recognize that reality and put their audience first and make it more interactive, like what we're doing here is one way to do it, but there's plenty of other ways to engage with an audience: polls, things, insights, however you want to do it. I think there's a lot of different ways that there could be value provided. And so it's put the audience first, content as the primary objective, know how to measure it the right way. I think the companies that look at virtual events that way open up a world of opportunity. You do one solid virtual event per quarter that's one day long, and you bring 5,000 people in, you have a bunch of different sessions. You have content for the entire year. You have more content that you can publish. You have your options about which are the best clips, not trying to figure out, what kind of like meme you can flip together for Instagram the next week. And so I do think that the hybrid will end up being the approach for progressive companies. All right. Prince, can you drive sales without any SDRs in house? Yes. The answer is yes.
Prince
all right.
Had to go. He left earlier.
That's all right. Got stuff to do. What do we got? We got one. I think we can do.
Did you find another one?
I haven't, but I've been looking through.
Yeah.
Got some Matthew commented on hot takes. Oh wow, I'm scrolling down. It's like 99 plus new messages. I'm way behind. Let's see. Let's scroll down to the bottom.
Oh yeah, Mark asked a new question at the bottom. Chris, why did you advise to go outbound at 100K ACV earlier? Can we dig deeper into that? Do you have a marker for when companies should scale outbound teams versus not based on ARR ACV?
Mark, where you at, brother? Let's get you on here. This will be fun.
All right. I'm in.
You're in. What's up, man? Good to see you. First time I've seen you. Good to have you.
Yeah, no, I've been following you guys for a while, so I'm stoked to be on here. I was just interested. You talked a little bit about like at a certain range, it makes sense to go outbound, which makes sense to me too, right? Mm-hmm. Like at a range, it's enterprise clients. Of course, you want to get targeted. What I'm wondering is, for certain companies in the space that you play in, do you advise, like, there's just the natural scaling of, hey, we're gonna hire more BDRs, right? Like, we're just gonna do that. Do you actually have advice for them on a trajectory for that based on ARR or ACV? Like, I was just interested by the fact that you said at that marker it makes sense to have outbound. Like, have you thought about that in a deeper way, and do you advise people on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the bottom end minimum where it makes no sense to have the specialized roles between an SDR and an account executive is if you're less than 10K, it literally makes no sense. Now, that's if you have really strong like efficiency of those two things, factoring in the cost, the funnel metrics, the sales compensation, like, and you get to a CAC payback period, like it's not that strong. And then, so for a middle performing, it's probably 15K. But then when it comes down to, if you're a small company, how could you differently allocate those dollars to get a different result? And so 100K feels obvious to me that any company would be using that, because if you look at the funnel metrics and the cost between those things and like what you would project, like, it's, unless your product sucks and you're very bad at doing this, like, it's probably going to be okay. It's just not going to be that efficient as it scales. And so when I think about, if you were going to continue to scale out your BDR team, I would think about trying to just up level the people that you already have, right? And so instead of scaling by number of people, what if you just had better people? And so, especially when you're selling at higher deal sizes, I don't think that the way to do it is by increasing the number of dials. I think it's about increasing the effectiveness of the people that are making the dials and doing the different things. So that's just like, happy to answer a follow-up, but that's just kind of like my position on it, is that I think that the companies that, whether it's scaling SDR teams or scaling AE teams, because the model is inefficient and because they want to grow the team so fast, they actually lose out on the highest quality people. And then because they are paying at or below market value and for different reasons, that's why their retention metrics are less than 2 years. Yeah. So I would be much more interested in having half as many sales reps that are way more experienced and higher paid and more productive, that's stayed with the company for 4 years on average instead of 2. And so if I was, building out a sales team, I would think about how to figure out how to do that, so I can put my sales team in a position where they don't need to change jobs after 2 years. That's the way that I would think about it.
I think I'll add to this too. I think another way to unpack this is think about how are your buyers buying? Like, what is the process that they have to go through in order to become aware of your product, assess options, go through a purchasing decision? And that should also inform what the go-to-market is through marketing and sales, right? And like, so when you talk about a massively priced product and an enterprise, like, they're not just going to go to a website and buy something, right? Like, they will need to speak with someone. There'll be multiple conversations, multiple meetings, this and that. So I think just another angle to look at this is based on your ICP and your ACV, walk through what the buyer has to do. And that should make it pretty clear where you'll want to deploy sales to enable that process and how you can support and enhance that through marketing as well. So I think that's another piece of it I would add.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Cool.
Oh, Jonathan's got a follow-up. How do you help companies map how prospects find them or how they find prospects? Or that kind of where I was going for that. So like, how do you go about the process of understanding how your buyers buy? Is what you're saying, Jonathan?
Sorry, I just realized I could unmute.
You got control.
You got it, because you went at it from the other side of the coin, because you know, especially with SaaS, you're going to have so many different potential starting points to get across the chasm and land and expand with people now. So you can have a variety of inbounds and outbounds. And to Chris's point, sub 10,000, who cares? But are people finding you? Have you, you know, what you walk through, you know, are people able to find you? Are they searching for it? Are you part of a, you know, that virtual B2B Amazon shopping experience, or do you have to go out and find them and figuring that out? Yeah, I'm curious from the demand gen or the marketing perspective, how you work with companies to help them figure this out, you know, because they might start in one place, need to go to another. They might need to reblend how they're going about it, but you know, everything's going to need a different way of understanding how your customers are finding you or you're finding them and creating that opportunity moment or SQL.
Yeah, this is something that I posted about on comment actually, because I didn't post today on LinkedIn. I missed it, but I commented on it and it got a lot of engagement, which is the first thing you need to assess is, are there people that are actively looking for what you do? That's the first step. And then if there is, then search is the first place to be. First start with paid and then figure out organic on high buying intent keywords. And on the off case that isn't the case, which I think is where our model, we can crush paid search, but where we make a huge impact is for places that do not have a lot of existing demand. They're selling a disruptive product. People don't know about it. They haven't created the category, blah, 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 all those different reasons. Then you got to focus on how you create awareness and awareness channels, right? So if people are already looking for you and there's a huge volume and you know that you're not capturing all of that demand and you know that there's, you know, you're not doing great and there's a lot of other places to win, then focus on all of the intent channels first. Search, conversion rate optimization, lead handoff optimization, review sites like G2 and all those different places. Like those are a good place to optimize first when you have thousands of potential buyers looking for something like what you do. On the flip side, if there's only 10 searches a month for this one keyword, then cover that. And then you got to focus on how do you create demand in awareness channels. So how do you drive awareness of your product? We use traditional advertising and it does work very well, but if it's a complex sale, you're going to have to do some education steps. And so what I would do is I would think, let's pretend your sales cycle is 180 days and it takes you 6 meetings on average to close it. And figure out what are the key things that someone needs to take away from those 6 meetings, and then start to reverse engineer how you deliver it to them in a different way. What are the objections? What are the things that they don't know about? When do they ask questions? And then how do you reframe and package it? Because you can't just promote a blog post that says, you know, why do people object to this statement? So you have to figure out thoughtful ways to educate them where it doesn't feel like you're trying to sell them something. So in general, I guess the easiest way is just to understand what your search terms are and then figure out whether or not they're looking for you. Right on, man. Good question here. Maybe one more, maybe wrap up. I don't think we're going to set the Demand Gen Live record tonight.
If we keep trying to break records every week,
I know.
This is going to become a long show.
Okay.
Oh, did we get from Bob at the bottom?
Yep.
Let
me see if I can cover this.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. Okay. The Facebook audience is 75K for ICP B or 300K for ICP A and B. Is 300K too big, even if gets to ICP A or 75K criteria not met ACV? Bob, what I would do here is I would break out the two audiences separately and I would see how they perform. And then based on the performance of those segmented tests, like in an ideal world, which is not something that I do every time, but if there's going to be massive spend or I'm trying to get complex or whatever, I would take every individual targeting criteria in its own ad set, this job title, this interest on top of this, you know, this professional association. I would take all of them individually, test each audience with the same piece of content, maybe multiple pieces of content, to make sure that the content isn't the issue. And then I would use all of the audiences that performed well, and I would start bucketing them together and make sure that the results stay the same. And at some point, you should end up with an audience that has a group of collective targeting criteria that you can consistently go to. So that would be, yeah, Bob says, perfect, thanks. That's how I would do it. And so, you know, I break it down into, I'll give you the example. We were selling a product to hospitals. So there was a bunch of different ways that I could get to respiratory therapists. Job title, respiratory therapy. Field of study, respiratory therapy. Professional association, American Association of Respiratory Care. And so 3 different ways to get to the same group of people. I tested them individually. They all performed the same. I put them together, and then I had my RT audience. And then over here, I'm going after nurses. But do ER nurses and ICU nurses perform the same? Do I need to split them out for some different reason? And so being able to, when you should be able to know, if you understand the audience, whether or not that level of segmentation is required for whatever you're trying to do. And then over time, you'll get to, you know, I had an RT audience, an ER, a nurse audience, and a physician audience. And I would just go to those people. And sometimes I would run them all together when that level of segmentation wasn't required. Get it done, Bob. Let me know how it goes. Cool. Well, a lot of chatter. I'd be really interested to understand if people, like, I can see it. I would love to know if people are like building relationships on the side. We don't position this as like a community. I know communities are popping up all over the sales community, and I see a couple of them on the marketing side as well, kind of popping up that are paid. We choose not to, because I just don't think that it's necessary to charge for this. And love having you all here. And I would rather have you here than have $10 or whatever I'm going to charge for it. You know what I mean? So appreciate all of you being here. Would love to know whether it's, you know, in the chat or in the post or an email afterwards, if you are meeting other people or, you know, building relationships or getting other things, or I guess anything meaningful that you feel like you've gotten out of this that I might not know about, would love to know about it. So however you want to share that with me would learn a lot and would appreciate it. And Megan, want to close us out?
Yeah, I think to build on that a little bit, it's been really fun last week and this week, almost doing like the really leaning into the live Q&A. I get the sense that everyone enjoys that. I think it's fun to get different people on the line, and you guys can all, you know, be famous and have your moment on the podcast. So curious if that instinct is correct. So I would love some feedback on that. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's funny, a lot of the topics that we talk about, and that came up tonight, are really around how do we work within our company to make change. And I think change management and challenging the status quo, being the person that has the new idea, you know, fighting against the machine. It's something that I think all of us come up against every day. And I think that it can be frustrating, especially if you're dealing with people that are not open-minded or that push back, or, you know, don't use common sense to see your logic and that you might be right. But I think one thing that is really important, and what I constantly remind myself of, is it's always better to not give up, and to fight your good fight, and to continue to bring things up, and, you know, continue to remind them, just because they say no, it's not no forever, it's no right now. I can't tell you, you know, how many times I would bring up the same topic because I was just like, I know this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to keep bringing it up, and eventually someone's going to let me try it or do it. And, you know, yeah, you can piss some people off, you can annoy people, you can rub people the wrong way, but I'm a believer that it's it's people like us that will continue to push the boundaries and continue to try and change people's minds, shift people's perspectives. It's never a bad idea to do that. So that just really felt like the underlying theme in so many of the questions that came up today. So I know all of you guys are fighting your own battles at work or otherwise, and would just give you all the motivation and the inspiration to keep trying and bring your battles back next Tuesday night, and we can continue to unpack them together.
And I see a couple requests for a Slack channel, and so what we'll do as homework is we'll figure out. I feel like we should do some type of challenge in order to unlock the Slack channel, because it'll actually be quite a bit of work, and so let's make sure that it's worth it. Love helping you. I get like 9 million Slack notifications every day, and so we'll figure out something to make it fun, and then we will try and figure out a way to make that happen, because I've seen it pop up in the chat a million times. And so stay tuned for next week. We'll have some more on the Slack channel. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. Short week for some people that celebrated Labor Day yesterday, and so 4-day work week. Let's go get it done. And Gaetano promised that he would be back, so if anyone wants to give him a hard time, like tag him in a post and be like, hey man, if you don't show up, blah 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 blah, I totally encourage that.
Hey, Chris, Megan, Uma here. I want to jump in. This feels like a condensed marketing class every time I come in thinking I know, and I hear you guys talk. There's so much more to learn. So I really vote really strongly for a LinkedIn group or somewhere where we continue this learning and conversation. There are like so many nuggets here, and it's like, oh my God, I want to learn more about this, learn more about that. And I see from Noam and Alyssa and everybody talking about it. So if there's something you want to consider, that would be amazing.
Cool. We will absolutely consider it. I appreciate the feedback, and so happy that it's helpful for you and everyone else here. So stay tuned. We'll be back with more info next week.
Have a good week, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Good to see you.
Take care.